I've got the police budget overview pulled up here. And so the police budget for Oklahoma City is $227 million a year. So I mean, it's a lot. Like that is significantly larger than the fire department. I mean, it's a bunch of stuff, and you can see some of the breakdown here. Again, big giant line items with tens of millions of dollars spread across them, or millions of dollars spread across them. Uh, but yeah, I mean, where it does feel like a PR blitz is like they have this like performance thing where they talk about what the metrics are, and then they'll compare them to like national numbers, and like
Which are all
overall,
still terrible numbers, by the way. I think
right.
most of them are like 50%, which is still a failing grade.
Right. And I think that's like what something is interesting is like one, yeah, like 50% of people report feeling safe, which doesn't sound great. I mean, if only half your residents report feeling safe. People say they're satisfied with the quality of police services. Most people probably don't even interact with them or have like a real understanding. So again, and that number, the percent satisfied with the quality, that's PR, right? I mean, that number moves completely on the basis of what the public, when surveyed, even is aware. And of course, we have no idea, like, are these scientific surveys where they're randomly calling citizens? Are these like online surveys where people submit, so they're self-selecting, which are, hugely biased? But I think the numbers that are the most interesting are like, you think about the largest category of crime, which is like property crime, right? Somebody steals something, whatever. They clear barely a quarter of them, which means like, and by clearing, that means like solving the crime, arresting and, getting the person who committed the deal. 28%. And apparently that's like somewhere in the realm of the national average. So that means like 72% of all reported property crimes. These aren't even the ones that don't, somebody says like, oh shit, somebody went through my car, like not worth even wasting my time to go figure it out. 72% of the reported property crimes never get solved. So it's like,
What's the point?
yeah, I mean, it's like, if you have a 72% failure rate, like maybe we should be addressing the root causes of what's causing people to go out and try to steal in the first place, as opposed to this like security theater thing of having the police come out. And you'll see this all the time on complaint forms about the police, like, I have my house broken into and the police just come and basically write an insurance report and hand it to you and say like, all right, we did our report, see ya. Like they don't dust for fingerprints, they don't call around, they don't check out the pawn shop. I mean, they're not like actually interested in like trying to solve your crime. They're just, they're just paper pushers.
Yeah, that's kind of common knowledge here. Like, is it really worth it? Like, on some stuff, no, it's just not worth the time. Nothing gets solved, and you know, in 1 year, my car got broken into 6 times, and you know what the police were able to recover for me? Not a darn thing.
Right.
I couldn't even get an extra patrol down my street, and this was years ago, and I'm not an activist. I'm not somebody who's like going out and like marching. I'm just a regular citizen that there you can't ignore these things anymore. I'm a rational person, and it doesn't make any of us unpatriotic to question our police force, and somewhere along the lines it's gotten taken up as this like you know rhetoric talking point, this like signal word. um and people don't even question our police force when it's so blatantly obvious if you look at these statistics. um, and it's unfortunate.
Well, and in a state that prides itself on its conservative values, it has always been striking to me, growing up here, um, that people complain about government overreach all the time, and yet seem
Allowing.
to not associate the fact that the people that can arrest you and put you in prison or shoot you are not somehow associated with government. I don't understand that. It makes no sense to me. So it
Yeah.
seems that for people who think that we ought to have more limited government, reducing the the ability of the police to harm people should be on the top of the agenda.
But unfortunately, one thing that this is a kind of what happens in a state when you defund education for 30 years. We've been cutting public education funding in our state for 30 years, and well, now those 30-year-olds, they're voting age, and a lot of them lack basic common sense. And I hate to say that because I love my state and I love people. But I really value critical thought and education to uplift people, but they've weaponized ignorance against our people, and people don't even know when they're voting and acting against their own self-interest.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the interesting thing to me with the policing is kind of Josh's point about limited government, but also like this idea that like this doesn't eventually catch up with you, right? I mean, many families in the midst of an opioid epidemic are experiencing addiction crises. Many families are experiencing mental health crisis. And like what I like really can't get is like during the police presentation, again, the PR, all we're paying for at this point is like a bunch of like shitty PR. Is they show us this program where they go, and I mean, I presume it was somewhat staged, but like they go to this man's apartment. He's got a mattress on the floor, and they're claiming he's in a mental health crisis, and they like hand him an iPad so he can like FaceTime with a therapist or someone to help him. And I'm just sitting there, like, thinking about this, like, in my own experience, which at some point I'm going to write down and, like, tell the police tell the city is, I had a family member or I had a friend who went through a mental health crisis, and, like, that would have been, like, less than useless. Like, one, it probably would have just, like, pissed them off. And then two, it's like they needed housing. They needed, like, addiction treatment. They needed to get access to medication. Like, what is an iPad for 20 minutes with a therapist going to do for them? Like, we had like immediate problems we needed solved a couple years back that we couldn't deal with on our own, at least not without like great. I mean, really, like there was no amount of money we could have even paid because there's nowhere for any of these folks to go except for like crisis centers or homeless shelters or jail.
Also, to play off of that point, I don't know if you're familiar with trying to navigate getting somebody help for addiction in our city. It is extremely easy to find programs to treat opioid addiction compared to crack addiction. I've had the unfortunate situation to have to find help for a friend who was trying to, get away from that. There is no help for crack addiction. It's almost like there are drugs that are easier to get help for than others, and it makes me wonder why.
I mean,
any thoughts?
There's a lot of racism in policing.